Please note that this video has spoilers for the subject. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. I either have or will cover other parts of this franchise, and this video either is or will be linked below. I'm not going to restate here what I did or will say in the other video. These videos get long enough as it is. There we go. Fantastic Four 2005 thoughts. And trying a slightly different setup so that I should be somewhat centered. Whilst not being really uncomfortable with how I'm sitting. And let's jump right into notes taken during rewatching. I think I want to start with just saying this really wasn't quite as bad as I kind of remembered it being, but you know, I haven't watched in a lot of years, and you know, I've read reviews in the days leading up to this, and yeah, it was very negatively received. And it's not a good movie, but it's not quite as bad as some kind of make it sound. Yeah, I will get into details over the course of the video. And there we go. Now, the opening lines has Reed analyze fairly objectively and explains why they go with Doom whilst Ben is cautious and cares about Reed's safety. Because, you know, if they didn't have it's not given a lot of lines, but yeah, just, you know, NASA turned them down, and yeah, they didn't really want to go with Doom, but they don't really have a choice, because otherwise you do have this thing of, why are they working with this shady guy who they don't really trust or like, you know? Now, and Reed does not like Doom interrupting his analysis. And Doom is immediately very possessive and mistrusting of Reed. And Doom already knew about NASA not wanting Reed, which also sets up, you know, for the rest of the movie, he does, so some of the time they're in his building, so, you know, okay, they're in his building and they're doing science, so they're making notes of their results, and it's his building, so he's allowed to read those results, you know, but, and he is himself, yeah, he helped fund the thing, so, it's, you know, he has some. But he's also watching what they're doing at the Baxter building, and yeah, so it sets up that yeah, he's paranoid, and Doom tells us there's a 4th mortgage on their home, the Baxter building. Sue changed her number? Reed doesn't need that though. How did they crash a simulator? It's one of those, it's an exaggeration to really hammer home just how careless and irresponsible Johnny is. I appreciate that Sue tries to help them while Doom is ready to abandon them, talking about when it goes wrong and when they're not shielded. Yeah, before I get into the next note, I just want to say, I don't think that the movie really does style over substance with much of the effects. I don't know. I don't agree with the critics on a lot of the when they say about excuse me. I'm not sure this is in the shot, but there we go. A lot of the time when the critics say, you know, this movie has too much CGI, I don't know, I feel like maybe they kind of miss the days when, you know, effects were practical. And back when effects were practical, a lot of the time they didn't do as much. You know, it's almost like the critics got so used to early days of CGI when definitely they overused it. They relied too heavily on it. And so they didn't really adjust back to when movies kind of, I don't know, there are still movies that rely too heavily on CGI and that have style over substance. But I just feel like a lot of the time critics say, "Oh, this movie has way too much CGI," and I watch it and I'm like, none of it is like it's not just there to like look fancy. And honestly, at least on this viewing, I didn't feel like any of the effects in this really were just there to look cool. I feel like the one of the big things is you want to cut between the CGI and then back to a human face, so that it's not just you're not just watching something that might look cool. There's a human, you know, there's a human being reacting to that. So because the moment you see a human face reacting, there's some, you know, some empathic, you know, not empathic, but it conjures up empathy when we see a human face and we can read what emotion it's conveying. We just, you know, in part it's instinct, just automatically, because it's like, okay, you know, back when we were living in nature, if you see another human being and they're scared, you're like, is there a wild animal nearby? Is that why that person is scared? Because in that case, I'm scared too, you know. So yeah, when you see a human face react to what you might intellectually realize is an effect shot, then you kind of, as long as it's acted well, you know, yeah, then you can have an actual human reaction to that effect. It's not just something that looks cool. And I feel like this movie does that fairly consistently. And yeah, you know, it's just, I don't, yeah, I disagree with the critics on that. Anyway, yeah, while the effects are dated, the scene of the cloud hitting isn't too bad. It's fairly exciting and keeps the focus on the characters rather than getting overwhelmed by CGI. The visuals of them getting their powers is very comic booky, and yeah, some people don't like that. You know, I don't think ultimately the movie has a problem with tone, but excuse me, I think I might have some more notes on that later on. Again, some of these notes I wrote like a week ago or 2 weeks, so I'm not going to get into it right now. But also, you know, I've come to this decision. I don't really want to repeat what critics said too much. I bring it up when I have something to comment on, you know, or if like 10 critics said basically the same thing, you know, it points to a pattern, you know. But yeah, you know, if you're very interested in how the movie handles tone, I would say the various critic reviews on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes convey it quite well. And I'd just be repeating those, and I try not to do that anymore. The doctor who leaves when Reed enters Sue's room is kind of a discount Luke Wilson. Evan's voice when talking while the thermometer is in his mouth cracks me up for some reason. And you know, it's not some weird thing. It's that's how you sound. Ben the matchmaker, again looking out for Reed, and you know, in this case, as Ben sometimes is, fairly aggressively, is like, you know, if I can't talk you into it, I'll have to trick you into it. I will set up a meeting where you and Sue are both there without either of you knowing, and then I'll just, you know, oh hey, two people are in the same room who used to have a relationship. Maybe we want to have a conversation, you know. But yeah, you know, it would have been so easy for the writers to just only go for the, the jokes with, but yeah, they try to characterize these, and that's also, I feel like, ultimately, this is a movie made by people who wanted it to be good. And I think that is at least, that's noteworthy, and it shouldn't be. It should be the natural, but, and it also does come through. You can tell the people who wrote this movie, they know, they have some knowledge of the comics. They didn't, and they didn't feel like they should downplay a lot of these elements. They, yeah, they're front and center, a lot of them. Now, and Doom dislikes being humanized. I appreciate that the movie doesn't waste a lot of time when it first establishes the various powers. It's too bad that not long after that it does start wasting time, among other things, on silly jokes that add nothing other than the supposed humor. I will say most of the joke, yeah, this movie did not make me laugh very much when it was trying to, nor did it on previous viewings. But yeah, just briefly, I think the last time I watched this was like 2005. I think me and a friend rented it from Blockbuster or something, back when that was a physical store rather than a metaphysical concept. Minutes after he discovers that he can, after he discovers that he can stretch, Reed uses it to do something good. Again, too bad that they won't use it much for much heroics, but he gets them into the room for Ben, and at first I was like, well, okay, but Ben was gone by the time they got in there, so what did they accomplish? But they see him off in the distance. At the time they're like, is that actually Ben? But yeah, the next time they see a big orange guy, they're like, I've seen that guy before, and he was leaving Ben's room, and he was the size of the hole that there was in the room that Ben left. I guess that's Ben. And it also, it's the first time the audience sees anything with the orange form. And yeah, if you saw the trailer, you know how it ends up looking, but, and same if you read the comics, but still, it's something you want to build up to, so yeah, the first time we see the unusually looking person, we see him from a distance, and we see only the back of him. I mean, you can just barely tell what you're looking at. You can tell that it has more or less it's got 2 arms and 2 legs, it looks like, but from a distance, it's difficult to tell. And yeah, I feel like they did a good job of that. And yeah, just to briefly comment on, for some reason in the 2015, first you see him relatively well lit, when Reed is going by, and then it cuts to like in a dark room where the thing is in the dark, and it's like, we know what he looks like. Maybe maybe one of those two was like a pickup shot. They didn't know they were going to do the other one or something. But it seems like they could have maybe edited around that a little bit better. The shot of him in a dark room talking to Tim Blake Nelson, ultimately he like puts, he moves his head out of the darkness and you can see his face somewhat. They could have kind of just used that shot every time more or less, or at least like maybe combine that shot with him in darkness, so it was like, okay, there's at least a little bit of the light on his face, because again, it matters if you can see a human face. Where Doom was proposing to Sue, now he shuts her down when she tries to explain the situation with Ben. He's he's treating her like an employee, which is part of their relationship, but yeah, it shows that his affection towards her is dependent on there not being a situation that he's frustrated by. You know, he also, when, you know, right, he's you know, he's proposing to her, then the wave comes closer, and then he's immediately, you know, he wants to abandon the, you know, the other three, and she wants to help. So yeah, it's very clear when he's in control of the situation, then he can show some, you know, positive feelings, you know. But yeah, the moment that it's not, he's treating her like something he can control. And yeah, it's good characterization. The first good look the audience gets of Ben's face is the first good look Debbie gets of it. And that is, again, so, you know, the movie could easily have just shown what he looks like before he left for, you know, for Debbie. But we just, you know, we see the bed crumbling under his weight, and we see the hole he left, and we see the orange figure off in the distance moving. But yeah, the first time we see his face, we see her face, and we see her shock. And you know, it is one of those things. Yeah, it's in part to help sell the makeup and the effect a little better. You know, look upon this face in despair. You know, when she sees it, she's scared, and you know that. Yeah, that sets up that that's the immediate reaction even someone who knows him has to seeing him, and that's a huge part of his character for the rest of the movie. You know, and I should say, I never watched the second movie. You know, I don't. Yeah, I think I just didn't feel like it after watching this one, you know, originally, and then it never happened. I actually honestly considered, before watching the 2015 one in theaters and doing the video on that, I genuinely considered watching this movie again and watching the 2007 one. And I was like, I really don't want to watch those movies again. And yeah, then more recently, I was like, there aren't that many movies left that are part of like the post-2000s boom of superhero movies that I haven't done any video on. And yeah, this is one of them. I think Catwoman's another one, and I think it's going to remain that. Now, and you know, the first thing Ben thinks of and does when he realizes what he now looks like is try to gently break it to his wife, pun not intended. You know, he spends some of the movie being very upset about it, and I think some people would say selfish. I don't think he ever quite, like, you know, gets to that. You know, he's too easily tricked by Doom once, you know. But yeah, the first thing he thinks is, I have to, you know, she is my wife and she deserves to know what has happened to me, and she should hear from me. You know, it's there are too many movies where we're supposed to like a character who does not make that decision, who very much, you know, I mean, Darkman, ultimately he tried, you know, she didn't recognize him. You know, you could argue that maybe he should have tried more than that first time, but you know, it was literally the first time he saw her after what happens to him. He tries to, you know, although at the time I think he also doesn't quite realize yet what he looks like. But yeah, you know, and I don't blame her for not recognizing him. You know, and you know, and he does try, you know, you could argue, you know, he does have the benefit of, you know, once he talks to her again, he does have the benefit of being able to hide what he now looks like. Man, I love that movie. I think I might have said this before, but it's probably my favorite Sam Raimi movie. Now, And the third one's not bad, although it's nowhere near the level. And the second one's passable. Now, let's see. Was there something else I wanted to say there? But yeah, you know, it's just, yeah, some of these characters that we're supposed to care about, they, you know, they have a chance, and then they decide not to. And Deadpool 2 is coming out soon. Just, you know, that has nothing to do with what I was just talking about. Just, you know, throw it out there. And yes, I'm obviously doing a video on that and watching it soon after the premiere. And the suicidal guy drops his briefcase, establishing how far of a drop it is. Again, that's, you know, they could easily have had him not have a suitcase when he got up there and just showed the water. But that shot of something dropping from the bridge into the water, yeah, it's a, you know, everybody's seen a briefcase. We know, you know, we have an idea of what that thing weighs, and yeah, there you go. That's what it's like if he does fall down there. So yeah. Suicide guy, come back. No, don't turn around. That's not gonna. Oh, buddy. The scenes of Jessica Alba stripping or the like are so. They're just added for you know, sex appeal, because, you know, it's so hot when a woman is sexualized against her will. And apparently the bridge one was literally written into the script when Alba was cast. So yeah, that transparent. I swear I did not mean that. I did not mean to use that pun. I do appreciate that Johnny saves the girl on the bridge. His first unselfish act, in Lisa Simpson's words. Too bad it's also one of his last. The scene on the bridge has tension and doesn't rely excessively on effects. And I mean, some of it is kind of contrived, but it does build fairly nicely with how gradually more and more mayhem happens on there. All four of them do something heroic on the bridge. Again, just wish it wasn't basically Ben's fault that there was a problem there at all. While the rubber suit is not very convincing, I do appreciate how much it looks like the comic and that Ben the Thing is not CG, although, excuse me, as I saw, I think a user review online point out, he is not big enough for the comic counterpart, and that's, you know, that's something that they do address in the 2015 reboot. But yeah, you know, it's one of those things that is never going to be. It either has to be CG or it's gonna be not big enough. You know, you cannot make a good, like, or, you know, maybe animatronic in some scenes, but you can't make an animatronic that can move as fast as the thing does. And, you know, I mean, there's some chance that the MCU will have the Fantastic Four. I believe that they'll be able to handle the tone. They've handled so many such, you know, and Infinity War handles a number of those such different tones so well, and actually making them work within the same universe. You know, that was the case before Infinity War, but Infinity War also manages it, you know, manages it within a single movie, and manages it from these two directors who before really only did the one tone, you know, for the two movies that previously directed. They did amazing. You know, they took notes from how the other movies looked and sounded and such. And yeah, it's just briefly, you know, I think that the Fantastic Four can work on screen. I think it's ultimately a matter of the right people doing, you know, some of the people doing this movie just were not the right people for it. And yeah, you know, so if they do show up in the MCU, that would be really, really amazing. I want to see them done well, and probably it will be a CG thing, but considering the CG Hulk, I really don't doubt that they could make that work, which certainly there's an argument to be made that the 2015 version doesn't quite work. And I've done entire videos on that one, so I'm not going to talk too much about it here. Which one of you is the leader? No, not you, Johnny. I will believe that Jessica Alba is your leader before I believe it's you. Too much of Ben's, too many, anyway. Ben's problems with his weight and appearance is played for laughs. Yeah, that is something that I, again, really appreciate about the 2015 one. And Doom gets very aggressive when talking to Reed about the mission going wrong in the Baxter building. We're seeing that as things are going further out of his control, he is getting increasingly angry and, ultimately even violent about it. And, I forget, but I think this scene comes after he has done some violence, but there's difference between him doing violence. He realizes on some level at this point, he still realizes if he tries to attack Reed or the others, they have powers. He's gonna have some problems with that. And I'm not gonna. I would have to agree with the people who say that. First off, his whole thing is way too similar to the Spider-Man, original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, Green Goblin thing, and that he ultimately just starts attacking people and being violent so that the Fantastic Four have a threat that they can stop. And I think that could have been, now I'm glad I actually brought it up, I think that could have been addressed. I think that, okay, he wants to kill the Fantastic Four. I think that you can argue that makes sense. But then he goes outside and he starts. Does he attack cop cars or something like that? He attacks randomly. I don't think they had to have him attack randomly. I think. I mean, what would have been his target? I guess once he thinks that he's killed the Fantastic Four, and he killed that one guy from the honestly, I mean, he only killed the one guy, right, from the board. Let's say that he yeah, after he kills them, just I'm almost certain he doesn't, at least have him say, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I don't think they have him say, and now for the rest of the board, because that's all you really need. Just don't have him attack randomly. It goes completely against his character. You could make an argument that he's lost his mind now and he just attacked randomly, but that's not very interesting. And up to this point, to an extent, his character has been interesting, and interesting villains are always better than boring ones. You don't have to make him sympathetic. Not every villain has to be sympathetic, but at least make them interesting, not just completely. And Reed really does not know how to talk to women, even ones he's used to be in a relationship with, which is accurate to the comic. But the joke is pushed too far when when he's talking to Sue about their emotional state. They're trying to learn how to control their powers, and he's got the magnifying glass looking thing. Just it pushes it too far. Just have him say. Yeah, once he says that first line, you need to control your emotional state better. Have him stop right there and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. Instead of just pushing it. I think he says 2 or 3 more lines about her emotional state or her controlling her emotions or such. Yeah. We get it, And Ben chuckles at their uniforms. I appreciate that he doesn't spend the movie brooding. Again, would have been so easy to do. He had a sense of humor before he became the Thing, and he retains it somewhat, even though he's less, he's not, yeah, before he becomes the thing, he seems like a fairly, I mean, he's not like the happiest man on earth, but he's not like unhappy really. He appreciates what he has, and he doesn't feel, yeah, he's annoyed with Johnny. He's mistrusting of Doom, but he's not like constantly being like really unhappy and such, and that enables them to show that he does become somewhat more withdrawn once he becomes the thing. It's also, again, not a huge thing, but like when he's in the Baxter building, he's trying, the time where he bites part of the fork off, which I do also think it's not funny, but it's decently done. Like, we see him have a little trouble picking up the fork. So, okay, there's focus on him eating and the fork. Then he picks it up, and he sticks it into a little, bit of fruit or something. And he puts it in his mouth, and we hear a little, like, metallic, like, sound. And we see his face, and I do also think Chiklis does a really great job. And he's like, what's happening? And, like, he starts chewing, and we can tell, okay, yes, for sure, some of the fork came up. And he looks at the fork, and we can tell there's a little, bite, human mouth shaped part of it bitten off, and yeah, and one of the next times you see him eat, he's by himself in a public place. If he wanted to be with someone else, he would ask. It's not like he has no friends. The bartender's like, first guy from Brooklyn who went into space. Come on, that deserves, that's cool, And yeah, he's sitting there by himself, and he's eating like this stack of pancakes, because, yeah, right now he wants to be alone. He wants to sit and eat some pancakes and just, he's frustrated. He's frustrated with how things have gone and how long it's been, which is, again, how long it's been since he became the thing without him, without Reed being able to reverse it yet. But yeah, to get back to that note, far too many action heroes brewed, especially in like the late 90s and early 2000s and such. I appreciate that the extreme sports is part of Johnny's character, so it's not completely, pointless, but they definitely play it up too much, and I have more notes on that, but in the next section. You always think you never act. Well, Johnny, his isn't the only bad performance in this movie. That's not funny. Rotten Tomatoes agrees. From what I recall, Alicia here is very similar to the comic book character, and I really appreciate that, her and Ben meet here in the first movie. This is a movie that actually has a lot of characters and a lot of character interactions, and it could very easily feel, very overstuffed, and I would argue it doesn't quite. It gets close at times, but it doesn't quite. But yeah, because you have this thing, here you have an African-American blind woman, and that's three things right there that make her life harder. And his life has now gotten hard, but he did used to be a straight cis white guy. He was even married, and clearly he and his wife loved each other. There are people out there who have had harder lives, and here you have this character who appreciates the good things in life. And she says, later in, I think, yeah, last scene, they, what's it called, they is it in Give It To, yeah, like their glasses hit each other, and he hits a little too hard. And again, there you have this thing of his body is now in a way that it didn't used to be, and he's having trouble controlling it, and it's having a negative effect on his life. And what does she say? You're better than good. You just need to work on your touch. And yeah, you know, very obviously implied that they're going to have, you know, a physical relationship. And then there's like people, oh, you know, isn't his, you know, to be fair, I made a penis joke about The Thing in the 2015 review, but there is, you know, it's same thing with like, you know, oh, the Hulk and Valkyrie, you know, can they even, there is, you know, not to be crass, but we're on the subject, there is such a thing as having sex without, you know, penis penetration. Just, you know, so it's not, yeah, he still has a tongue. Now, let's see. I appreciate that Sue and Reed do and did have some good times together. That it's not all woe is me, you know, or, you know, both of them being frustrated that they're not together. I know it's not easy being Orange. And Reed and Ben fight because we can't have enough hero-on-hero fighting in these movies. As fights go, it's not too bad. I appreciate that it's not just immediately, you know, Reed doesn't win immediately, you know, Ben gets some, you know, some punches in and such, and Reed ultimately he has to really stretch a lot, you know, before he can actually stop Ben. Now, while some of the characterization ends up being poorly written, I do appreciate that they made an effort to capture how the various characters feel about each other and act towards each other. You know, a lot of these movies have only the one hero to deal with. This one does have Thor, and ultimately, I mean, the X-Men movies have characters just standing around in the background, and ultimately this movie never does have that. You know, every time there's more than one character in a scene, at some point, every single character is going to say something or do something that is relevant to the tone of what's going on. You know, if people are arguing, they're going to start arguing. If Johnny is frustrated with having to stay there, the others are trying to tell him, you have to stay here. You know, there's never, no character ever acts completely in a vacuum. And yeah, you know, and really, these, I appreciate that some of the X-Men don't have very complex interpersonal relationships with one another. That comes with such a large team. And the Fantastic Four are family. They're, you know, in some ways literally so. You know, Ben is literally the only of the four who isn't in some way, you know, who isn't married to one of the others or the sibling of one of the others. And he is still part of the family. You know, he's like the bigger brother that Reed, I don't think, has. You know, so not in these movies, at least. And yeah, it's a really important thing that they're all, you know, yeah. I'm not gonna sit here and spell out their interpersonal character relationships. You know, they do a good job of showing them in the movie, and they're a big part of the comics. So Ben sees Doom and wants to help him, despite him not trusting him earlier. For his, pun not intended, hard exterior, he does have a lot of heart. And I'm glad they captured that from the comic. And I suppose I should make clear, I'm talking about right after Ben was turned back to, you know, the way he looked before he became the Thing. You know, he sees that Doom is, you know, very affected also, and he's not like, what's going on, get away from me. He's like, the machine worked for me, it could work for you too, you know. Reed falling down on the outside of the building is genuinely tense. You know, there's this sense of, you know, how badly might he get hurt. And yeah, again, I mean, this is, it could so easily just have been, ooh, look at this cool effect of this rubber man falling down a building. But, you know, I think the music is part of it, but also just you do see his face, and you know, it's not always that compelling or convincing CG, but you do see a face, and it's clear that, and then by the time he's fallen all the way down, he's clearly like unconscious or something. Doom's body gradually being more covered in the material is nicely done, obviously mirroring his deteriorating state of mind. And yeah, the makeup is decently done, and yeah, I greatly appreciate how they gradually increase it over the course of the movie, which, yeah, that's it's something that they really couldn't have done with the Green Goblin, obviously, but the rather, yeah, they do it some with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Green Goblin, but not the Raimi Green Goblin. And yeah, it's a tool that the movie has, and they use it well. That's always something to be commended, I feel. And Doom genuinely tortures Reed. I mean, he could just let him sit there, but the finger, that's nasty. Doom's eye acting through the mask is pretty good. I don't feel like Johnny dealing with the missile is style over substance either. I mean, I wouldn't have cut any of that scene, really. He flies away from the building so that the missile exploding isn't going to hurt his family. Then he flies very far up, and then he shoots a fireball, hoping that that the missile will follow the fireball and explode. That doesn't work, so he flies away again, putting distance between him and the missile. Then he sees the garbage boat, lights it on fire. I suppose there's a metaphor for the movie there, a garbage fire. And he flies past it, and the missile does, blow up the garbage. And he immediately stops flying. He's like, oh, phew, that's... If he, at that point, had, like, flown up and done the symbol 4 that he does at the very end, which I also don't think is, like, yeah, he's kind of a show-off, and it's a good way to end the movie. If your characters have a symbol, it's good to end the movie on that symbol. It's a triumphant kind of thing. It's, yeah. The climax is decent. It at least uses all 4 powers, but I think the Blockbuster Buster said everything there really is to say about the climax. I appreciate that we are shown that the 4 are sometimes exhausted by using their powers to a really strong extent, and yeah, they're at the end of the climax. They're really like, just, yeah. And, they do the psychic power blood thing, which is, really old cliche of, and I'm not sure I've ever seen it in the comic, or at least I've mostly read Fantastic Four. Let's see, I didn't write any. I read some of the 60s ones, and I read some of the 90s ones. I don't remember ever seeing the bleeding from the nose, from the, and the electrical interference. They're at the end on the ship, on the, what's it called, transport ship. They're shipping all these containers. The electrical interference makes it clear Doom still has some powers, and there's still, so yeah, he seems to be stuck inside the metal thing, and they're shipping him back to Latveria, but he's not without power. Now, that takes us to, excuse me, notes taken, excuse me, before rewatching. Now, the movie is an hour and 41 minutes if you do count the end credits, and an hour and 34 and a half minutes if you don't count them. And, you should probably know there is no post-credit scene. This was before that was particularly a thing, although I think the first one was 2003's Daredevil. The original cut of that has a post-credit scene. It is kind of weird that they even, I mean, maybe just make it the last scene, before the MCU, and I still see people leaving the theater before the post-credit scene. It wasn't really something you knew they were always going to do, but I mean, really, is there a single? Yeah. The Incredible Hulk has it as the last scene, not a mid-credit scene, not a post-credit scene, just the last scene. Other than that, every MCU movie has either or both a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. Now, a ton of the IMDb goofs are related to inconsistencies in the thing's weight and strength, and, yeah, a bunch of the time he'll just make things break under his weight, and yeah, they should probably have just done away with a lot of those gags, especially since, a lot of them come across as more comical than tragic, and I mean, he is one of these tragic characters. He is never going to look normal again, and he doesn't sit down and wallow in self-pity. He uses it, he's a lot stronger and heavier than he used to be, and he can use that to do good, and that's what he does. But I mean, ultimately, he is like, one of these, yeah, like Darkman, and Darkman never tries to make you laugh. And there are, like, some of the bad guys laugh at the yeah, some of them do it as they're doing it to him, but the movie never wants the audience to laugh at the way he looks. Neither do the two sequels. And I think, did he appear in some comic books or something? I don't know if they do it there, but yeah, I don't think as many of them, at least, as should have been comical in this movie. And a lot of the other groups are, ones related to science, and for those of them that could easily be corrected, they should just have had someone go over them to make them correct. And some of them couldn't really have been, some of it is like comic book science, and the kind of science that, as most people know, if you're hit with like radiation, you're not very likely to get superpowers. You're more likely to have, it's going to change the way your body looks and works, but probably not in a way that anyone is going to find cool or appealing, So, yeah, with a lot of these, you do have that kind of thing, but yeah, some of it should have just been changed. Now, because of when this was written, Johnny is into extreme sports. That has not aged well, and it was never particularly compelling. It's just there to appeal to youths. That's it. Just so many of these movies did not try to make it work as like part of like, it's someone's character, or it's like several of the X-Men movies show that, like Wolverine likes driving fast in, like in cars or on motorcycles, but it's never just there. In the first X-Men movie, he does use it briefly, and you see like he's like so into it, but he's also hurrying to try to, like, at this point he knows that Rogue is in a train station. If he doesn't get to her, yeah, he might not, Xavier can find her again. But does he know at this point about the jet? I think, yeah, he knows about the jet, but it's like, will they use the jet just to, catch up to one, teen girl who's run away while they're also trying to fight, mutants, other mutants, so, yeah. Yeah, to get back to my prepared remarks, yeah, it's just the extreme sports is just there to appeal to youths. Far too much of the running time is devoted to this. Johnny's character is, very effectively established in the first few seconds of his first appearance. The extreme sports don't actually forward the plot any. The first one shows his powers manifesting. That could have been done without such obvious appeals to attention. And let's see, the bike one, I mean, he kind of, is that where does his power, he tries to use his powers and he kind of fails? I just got done watching the movie and I'm already forgetting because it's so unmemorable. They wanted to be able to advertise the movie. Come see our movie, and you'll see a guy, skiing on extreme slopes, and you'll see a guy in a BMX race. You know. Meanwhile, when there's that other guy who wants to like race him, he just like torches his tires instead. Before you say, oh well, he didn't want to race in the middle of the city. Well, why does he ruin the guy's tires then? That's going to take forever to move the car. I mean, if he wanted to, just have like the yeah. If the point to be made is Johnny doesn't want to race inside the city, he could say to the other guy, we're not going to race among all these other people, someone's going to get hurt. And then the other guy, like, calls him a chicken or something. And Johnny shows, like, he's frustrated. But then he lets him drive. And then, like, cut to later, and the guy is, like, walking back to the car, having parked it somewhere safely. And then he sees that the wheels have been, like, melted. And then you see Johnny, and he flies away, like... But there's just no good. And I honestly, if there had been a car race, I mean that could have been a fun action scene. Maybe like that would have been a nice way to stop crime as well. If like criminals are going, leaving a bank and they get into a fast car and he either drives to catch up to them and we have a car chase, or he flies to catch up to them, and either way that would be. But just seeing someone do stunts for fun, it's if your movie is not directly about extreme sports, it's just basically, if a scene doesn't add anything to your movie, you probably should just remove it. And that is another, I will say it's a relatively tight movie. You have some scenes, especially around the middle, that don't really do anything. But all in all, I mean, like I said, if you don't count the end credits, and back then there was really no reason to, if you want to appreciate the people who made the movie, it's more than an hour and 34.5 minutes, but that's not a very long time. Just, sit for a movie that has, so many major characters, and most of them are given a reasonable amount of screen time. So now, the basic look of the team is fairly close to the comic, as is several of the personalities, and I really appreciate. Oh, I did not need to read that. Sorry. Fortunately for him, post-rockification, the Thing is attractive to a blind little troublemaker. In the comics, Johnny being a jerk also costs him the cars he loves. Now, the following is all from memory. I haven't read this comic in years, so I might get stuff wrong. In one comic, Spider-Man goes on a date with Sue. Johnny doesn't like that because he doesn't like Spider-Man, which is your first clue that he's out of his mind. So he sabotages the date. And at the very end of the story, Johnny returns home, goes to his garage. He doesn't see his car right away, but does find a paper note. It's from Spider-Man, who back then would literally sign, like, I think he drew a little spider, a little red spider, 8-legged spider on there, to sign. Yeah, I appreciate that. Anyway, the notes from Spider-Man, it says that his webbing dissolves after an hour. My webbing dissolves after an hour. I webbed up the car at 7:15. Now look up and try to guess what time it is. And Johnny looks up, sees that his car is webbed to the ceiling. Then we see the house from outside. There's a loud crash, and Johnny yells out, horrified. I've always rather enjoyed that because I cannot stand when characters are jerks to Peter Parker, which is also why I really resent, for example, Flash. And no, I'm not that big a fan of J. Jonah Jameson either, even though I appreciate that his character can be funny. I would like him way better if he didn't hate Peter Parker and well, he hates Spider-Man, he doesn't hate Peter Parker. And I will acknowledge that the J.K. Simmons portrayal is perfect. It's lifted right out of the comic, and if they ever do recast the part, which they haven't so far, yeah, they probably, if at all possible, they should try to get him back. Now, from the IMDb trivia, I'm going to mispronounce that. Ioan Gruffudd's efforts to keep an American accent continually were hampered by the fact that he would receive new script pages on a regular basis, forcing him to learn new lines at short notice. So, like Halle Berry's Storm in the first X-Men movie, the acting is bad not because the actor is usually bad, but because the actor is preoccupied with maintaining an accent they find unusual. I haven't seen Ioan in a lot else, but he is incredible in Horatio Hornblower. When I first watched those, I was like, okay, I'm going to give him a chance, because maybe he's just bad in Fantastic Four. And yeah, I love him in that, and I love that series. I'm not currently planning to do videos on it, because apparently there's like a million other media that the character has appeared in, and I wouldn't be able to do the films justice as talking about them as, as they are adaptations of, yeah. Again, when it came to The Shadow, I loved that movie too much to not talk about it. And I forget, did I look for comics and just didn't have any in the libraries? I forget. Now, in some ways, this movie is too similar to the comics that were very of their time when they were created 40 years prior to the film coming out. In that regard, this movie has a tougher job than some of the others. Spider-Man, again, there, definitely some credit goes to Sam Raimi, the writers, and Danny Elfman's score, and some of the actors. But in some ways, it was a lot easier to update, a lot of the, ultimately, Peter Parker, he's had tragedy in his life. He's a teenager trying to, make, dating work. He's doing schoolwork. And then he also has this great responsibility, which, a lot of teenagers aren't superheroes. Most aren't. But as a teenager, you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. At least a lot of teenagers do. And yeah, this was a comic that actually said, no, you're right, kind of, or here is a character who's, who you can really empathize with, because he does actually have, if he, when you have the powers that he has, and you don't do something, and something bad happens, it happened because of you. I think I actually got that word for word. Yeah. In my, it is not very long since I watched that movie. I watched it not many days before going to watch Infinity War. So it's not that impressive. But yeah, a lot of that, one of the things that they didn't really update in the Amazing Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy still wears the miniskirt, and of course she wore a miniskirt in the 60s. Star Trek TOS, the girls wore miniskirts, but other than that, a lot of, and I think it's the abridged script for the Amazing Spider-Man that points out, okay, you only have you only have one arm and you want to have two, robotic limb, you don't have to regrow it again in the 60s. Excuse me. It seemed like a perfectly, yeah, I mean, people today, if they, not everybody can afford it and such, but it seems like he could. He is trying he's trying to solve a problem in a way that really isn't necessary, and it's not, and the reason that he's trying to solve it the way he's trying to solve it is because that's the comics, again, so, but other than that, in a lot of ways, I mean, really, the Raimi trilogy, in some ways, doesn't even need, I mean, I guess the size of some of the cameras used, but other than that, and the TV footage of, the big TV, the big screen that shows in Spider-Man 3, where you see Spider-Man footage. Other than that, the Raimi movies almost could take place, maybe not quite in the 60s, I guess, but certainly decades before they came out, So yeah, a lot of what's in Spider-Man didn't need to be changed for the movies. In this case, yeah, you maybe in at least some ways you kind of did. The X-Men movies also does away with, early on, Xavier could be a tiny bit creepy, and some of the, like, I think in the very first X-Men issue, yeah, you have these like teenagers creeping over Jean Grey, and it's like, okay, yeah, you know, it was considered socially acceptable to be like that back then, but yeah, that's not in the new X-Men movie, Yeah, I mean, the closest you come is maybe, in Apocalypse, Cyclops, the kind of staring at Jean once he can look at her without, you know, greatly injuring her with the beams. But other than that, the movies have kind of done away with that, even though in Apocalypse you have a bunch of teenagers in the 80s. So, you could easily reason, well, yeah, they're gonna, you know, they're gonna do jerk things that we saw in 80s movies and that teenagers did in the 80s. But they decided not to, because that's not, and again, that's not something you need in the X-Men. If you make an X-Men movie that doesn't have anything, which is why they haven't, that doesn't have anything about the whole, wanting to be accepted, even though they're very different, that would be an issue. That's central to X-Men. But yeah, ultimately, some of the thing with Sue wanting Reed to notice her more and such, that, yeah, that was in the 60s comic, and a lot of people probably expected it. And ultimately, I mean, you have to have some conflict between, yeah, you have these two geniuses, and I mean, let's hypothetically say that there wasn't really anything, that just, they're two geniuses, so they do genius stuff together, and there's no, that would be kind of boring. So again, I do think the MCU could do it, and I hope they will, and I'm very, yeah, I want to see that. I want to see how they make all this one. Meanwhile, the relationship between Johnny and Ben, that doesn't really need to be changed. Although, the movie maybe plays it up more than it should. Yeah, movie Johnny is like comics Johnny. He's such a jerk, and yeah, I don't know. I've never really understood why you make a character be that much of a jerk unless he's a bad guy. But I guess in the 60s, kids in the 60s would think, ah, that's cool. He's such a jerk. I wish I could misbehave like that. Now, But yeah, to get back to my prepared notes, the 2015 Fantastic Four toned down all this stuff reasonably well, but then ended up being bland, and that movie isn't very good, as on the whole. Apparently, this movie was originally going to be a comedy, like when Chris Columbus was doing it, and Tim Story was hired to direct, as because he's a comedy director. As much supposed humor as there is, this is not a full comedy, and I do really appreciate that. It's action movie, I guess. Yeah, it's basically an action movie with a sense of humor, and more humor than some of these others do. And yeah. Let's see. I don't mind that Jessica Alba is playing a character that in the comics was white. The problem is that she's a bad actress. And the sexualizing of her also goes against the comic. Tons of female comic characters are sexualized. Honestly, probably the majority of them. Sue Storm is one of the few that aren't. At least she is still smart in this too, but Alba cannot sell smart. It's just, you do not buy it. Now, a few things that aren't related to this movie. The teaser for the new Robin Hood movie with Jamie Foxx applies a John Woo sensibility to the legend. A bow firing accurately as fast as a semi-automatic, pistol is absolutely ridiculous. And it also made me think of the Thief game series, especially when he's like jumping, he like jumps through like a window or something. It's I don't know, just yeah, kind of made me, maybe especially the 2014 one. And I've seen people compare it to like Arrow. I didn't watch that, and I probably won't. I don't watch a lot of TV series. Maybe the movie will be fun. I have not made up my mind on whether or not I watch it. I mean, there are a lot of Robin Hood adaptations that I have not watched, although I suppose most of them are like really old, Yeah. I haven't made up my mind on it. I just had those things to say. Now, Twin Perfect put out Why You're Wrong About Batman v Superman Part 3, and it appears to be the last part. And I will say they seem to have gone into every, like, really frequently stated question, other than the ones that I don't think they could answer without... Yeah. Anyway, I argued against the points that I'm interested in the video and its annotations that I did on that movie, and everything else, they're still really reaching to try to defend it. And yeah, I'm sorry, but it's fine to be contrarian, but sometimes they feel like it feels like they're being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. And yeah, I mean, if you want to troll people, fine. I mean, they're not hurting anyone, but maybe you'd get more positive attention if you weren't trolling people and stuff like that. Just yeah, it's their decision, and I'm very sure that they will not watch this video. Now, let's see. I am going to briefly read through, not out loud, skim through my old written review. I did read it before watching, but this is the first time I reread it since rewatching. Let's see. Yeah, the one thing I pointed out that I do briefly want to get into, the writers keep reusing this, this same basic scene setup. One of the four is unhappy, starts a fight, gets angry, and leaves. That happens two or three times in the film with little to nothing separating them, and it's just, yeah, the again, they have to show how these characters, how there's interpersonal conflict between them, but it should maybe have been better. The Scooby-Doo live-action movie opens with everyone getting into an argument and everyone just, going their separate ways. That is not a movie that you really want to look to for any inspiration. I forget if it came out before this, but I'm not saying that they should never necessarily have gotten the idea from that movie, but maybe do just one scene and do it basically like that. Have everyone air their grievances, and then like they yeah, go into more or less separate, and then minutes later they all come back together, and then you've gotten that out of the way. I get why they like, if like one of them got angry and left at the very start of the movie, then you're slowing down the origin part of the origin story of the movie, so I appreciate how quickly this movie gets to the origin story stuff. It really, like, this movie could easily have started with a montage of Reed getting turned down by scientists, and instead there's just the line, "This is not the first place we looked," and everybody else said no. Okay, so that happened, and it's, there's a lot of stuff like that. And that's, the 2015 movie feels the need to show everybody, basically everybody being recruited for the project of this teleporter, and then they build the teleporter, and finally get to the part where they actually go through the, where this movie just says, let's do that right away. It's not. And part of it is, as others have pointed out, the 2015 one is a little embarrassed to be, it's like the filmmakers looked at they they signed a contract, and then they looked at what they had to work with, and they were like, oh man, this is embarrassing, let's, and just, I get why some people are embarrassed to, about these comic books. And again, some of the stuff is very of their time, but there's a reason they lasted so long. We're not talking about like making a movie about some, something that never left the 60s. We're talking about something that lasts a real long time. And if you look at it and you're embarrassed, you're the wrong person to be making the movie. It's, I'm not saying that you're wrong to dislike it, but there are countless people who would kill to have the chance to be making that movie, and you're in the way. Now, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I also mentioned that Reed is kind of too young compared to, the comic, and I mean, yeah, his what's it called? Yeah, he's got some gray hair, you know, in the, yeah, distinguished gray hair, In this, it's a side effect of the radiation, or yeah, the cosmic storm, whatever. In the comics, that's because that's his actual hair. I forget his age, but he's not 30. I'm almost certain. Maybe 45 or 50 or something. And part of it is that if you cast a male actor of that age, and then you cast a female actor who's, I don't, what was Alba in this? 25 or something. Some people are going to say that's kind of creepy. And you will have a really hard time convincing a Hollywood executive that one of the leads in the movie that they're pumping a lot of money into, who's a woman, should not be a 20-something, but should be, you know, age appropriate. I forget her age in the comic. I you know, but you know, it's, I get that they want, you know, an attractive female. It's not as though there aren't, you know, women who are still attractive. You know, Alias wasn't afraid to cast, you know, actresses and let them be sexualized, and usually it was them sexualizing themselves to gain something, and they usually got what they wanted. You know, and that was something that was supposed to appeal to young people. You know, it's, you know, the Sydney Bristow, the lead, is like a college student. You know, it was made to appeal to college students, and yet you have these, yeah. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, and I criticized that the Sue actually says, "You're such a dork." Yeah, and yeah, so at least some of the humor is fairly juvenile, and yeah, and there's way too little supervillain action. You know, the one fight, very short at the very end. That really, again, I have a lot of problems with the first Raimi Spider-Man, but it has a pretty decent villain presence. He turns fairly early on, and you have a lot of scenes of him, you know, attacking people and such. And that's also a movie that does a good job of capturing that the Green Goblin is kind of scary, and he's, you know, kind of surprises you and such. You know, it's, yeah, there are several scenes where you really didn't expect him to show up, and there he is, and shocking someone. Now, and yeah, I do like Julian McMahon, and yeah, as Victor Von Doom. It was really, you know, the library's DVD copy has some, you know, there's like 20 minutes of, like, I think it's basically Jessica Alba. You know, she grabbed the camera and she's going around talking to her castmates and such, so you hear their original accents. And yeah, it's probably the first time I've ever heard his original Australian accent, but that's, yeah, I'm never gonna get used to that. Or Ioan Gruffudd's original Scottish accent, I think, maybe. You know, he sounds British in Hornblower as far as I recall. So yeah, but yeah, I do. I know a lot of people don't. You know, I love him as Cole on Charmed, and I think he does. Yeah, this has a fairly similar, you know, yeah. And I have not seen Nip Tuck. I find the plastic surgery, except in like cases where really, I mean, I understand why, like if some of your body was burned, for example, or, you know, someone, maybe you were attacked and it left scars, that I can understand. But the it galls me to no end when someone who doesn't need it is like, but I want to improve the way I look, at least some, and I'm not that angry at the people. I am angry at the culture that encourages those people, because yeah, I mean, you look at cultures that don't, where it's very uncommon, and yeah, the people there are not like obsessing over whether getting plastic surgery. Although I'm not saying that they don't. Too many cultures have way too much focus on the physical. Now, and I've said this before, but it bears repeating. If you have if you're going out with someone, or you're married to someone, or the like, and they say that if it's your idea and they're just supportive, that's fine. But if they tell you you should get plastic surgery, if you can, strongly consider leaving them, because it's just too shallow. If your partner looks at you and thinks, man, I really wish we could change their appearance, yeah, they're not a keeper. They're a kick 'em to the curb. Now, yeah, and as I say in my review, yeah, Doom has too little to do and too little screen time. Now, and I also note that it's going to bother a lot of fans. But of course, if you're watching this video, especially to this point, yeah, the idea is that you already watched the movie. So anyway, I forgot I put this at the bottom instead of up with the other non-Fantastic Four stuff. Anyway, so Trump just said that the Paralympics were hard to watch, and as Chokes pointed out, he wanted praise for that. He really is Eric Cartman. There's that episode about Jimmy coming up with the fish sticks joke. Spot on portrayal of Kanye, by the way, in that one, and he really lives down to that these days. Cartman imagines, gradually more and more positive for himself, and one of them has Jimmy say, "You're so nice to be my friend, even though I'm disabled." And I suppose that's, yeah, to briefly, the movie, it does have some strong suits. I will maintain it could have been a lot worse. I have not watched the 1994 Roger Corman one. I don't really want to spend money to watch it, and my theaters, libraries. Wait, is that? You know what? I might have been a little too quick. Maybe they do have it. Maybe I'll consider watching it then. I'll check. I'll see if they have it. Roger Corman, as long as you know what to expect, he basically gives you what you know to expect from him. So, yeah. But yeah. Catwoman does a lot to try to get away from the way the character is in the comics, and part of it is that they went closer to Batman Returns than to the comics, but it goes so far away. I mean, yeah, you have so little in there that rings true, that feels like the comic, and it's miscast, and it's one of the movies that, yeah, just, it's, again, if you genuinely really don't think that you can make an adaptation work without capturing at least a good bit of the original essence, then you're probably just the wrong person, or maybe it's not the right time to make the you know, that adaptation, and that, honestly, yeah, were the mid 2000s that good of a time for Fantastic Four? I mean, there's such goody two shoes, and I mean, yeah, that wasn't really. I think the it would have been very difficult to do the superpowers well. But I mean, some of the 80s might have been a decent time to do the adaptation. I forget, I think maybe there was like rights stuff, or maybe no one really wanted to make it back then or something, but there are 80s movies that are incredibly, like, defiantly wholesome and that are considered classics. So yeah, I think that might have been a decent time. The mid 2000s, I mean, when you have Johnny Storm doing extreme sports, I mean, again, he's into fast cars in the comics, so they didn't make that part up. But yeah, if you think you have to, again, I mean, the Spider-Man movie sure didn't. You know, the first Spider-Man movie came out in 2002, same year as Triple X. They could have, you know, been like, let's just put it in. Well, let's, you know, give him a sidekick who does extreme sports or something, you know. But no, instead they were like, in the comics he has personal tragedy, he has issues with, you know, dating and such, and the supervillains attack people he cares about. So let's put it in the movie. And yeah, so now, is today the time for really wholesome? Let's see. Are there really any of the major? I mean, some of them are very, yeah, you know, yeah. Some of them are good because it's the right thing to do, and yeah. Again, I don't love everything that the MCU does, but or that they do for the MCU, that Feige and the others have done for the MCU. But I do think that they are incredible at capturing the essence of something and making it work today. There's very little where I feel like they didn't manage to update and still make it work. And yeah, I so yeah. Next week, I think, is the first of very few thoughts on LOLO. And I think next week again, I think that's Deadpool 2, and then Fantastic Four 2, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Yeah. Send happy thoughts. I will probably need them from that movie's, yeah, from what I've heard said about it, and you know, seeing video reviews and such. So yeah. But anyway, you know, I enjoyed recording this. I hope you enjoyed watching. Till next time.